In this video, I'm going to show you how you can do some inventive things with type in Illustrator. Now, to open a document in Illustrator, you do the exact same thing you would do in InDesign. You download the program onto your computer, and then when you open the app, you go to Create New, and you can title your document with whatever you want. I'm just going to call it Test. Make the dimension 6 by 9 so that way you are designing in the right size document, and then you can hit OK. Now we have a document. You might notice that there are no margins. It's not a big deal. Okay, so let's talk about type. So we can make type in Illustrator, the same way that you would in InDesign. It's a little bit different. Instead of drawing out, if you draw a text box, it will fill in the text box with placeholder text. And what's good about having a text box is it will force the text onto different lines. I'm going to delete this. The other way that you can get text in Illustrator is by just clicking. And this will give you an infinite line that you can keep typing forever and ever. Infinite line that I'm obviously not typing words anymore. I can't type enough words to keep going, but let's just make this really big, and there we go. And you'll just see that it never breaks onto another line. This can be good if you're trying to type a title of a book, and then if you want something to go on to another line, you would just hit enter and create a line break. Okay, but why am I bringing you here? Is because in Illustrator, you can do some really cool things that you can't really do in InDesign, or you can't do as well. So I'm just going to click and I'm going to type the word lost. Let's imagine that I have a book and the title is Lost. And I'm going to change my typeface. In Illustrator, the default is Myriad Pro. And I'm just going to use this font. I'm not doing this for any particular book, so it doesn't really matter. And I can make the type as big as I want without worrying about getting an error. Okay. So now I have my title Lost. And what if I wanted to move these letters around? Right now, when something is typed, you can't really all the letters go together. What I can do is turn this type into an object, and that will make it a lot easier to edit. Now I want to point out that right now we see this in our layer 1 as lost. L-O-S-T, it's showing up here and it's showing up there. But if we want to, we can change this into an object. Changing it into an object will mean that we can't change the typeface anymore, and we also can't add any new letters. So make sure that things are spelled the way that you want and that they are in the typeface that you want before you do this. So we're just going to select this. So we want it to be selected. And then we can go to Type and find Create Outline. The shortcut is Shift-Command-O. And now let's look. This is no longer type. Now it's a group, and this group is made of shapes. Now if I want to, I can, because it's a group, it's going to move together still. If we want to, we can ungroup this by going, I think, to Object. You know what? I'm not entirely sure. Oh, there it is. I wasn't entirely sure where it is because I usually just use the shortcut, but I want to point out this is true for any of the Adobe programs. If you aren't sure where to find something, you can type it into help. It might take a few seconds, but you can type it into help and it will point you to where to find this thing. So I now know to find this here. So I've just ungrouped these letters and now I can move them wherever I want. So I'm going to select all of them to move them here. I'm going to make this bigger by holding down Shift. So that constrains the proportions. And now I'm going to just select this O and move it. So now we don't have preview mode in Illustrator, but now what we see is my O is missing. And I'm just going to, type the author's name, by Jane Does, and I need to make this much smaller. Let's make you size 36. There we go. And we see that now we have a missing O. And I think that's kind of a fun way to 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 show that there's something in the line in the text that's kind of, it's a way to show that how the text is reflective of the idea. And when you do something like this, you want to make sure that you're taking out a letter or you're moving a letter that doesn't change the readability of the word. Okay, so that's one thing that we can do. Some other stuff that we can do. Let's say that our book is about, let's say if you want, you can cut your text apart. Let's get I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna change the typeface to something a little bit. There we go. Let's try that. And I'm going to make this bigger. Again, I'm holding down Shift and dragging, and that just makes the text bigger without changing the numbers, although the numbers do change. Notice that this is still text. We can see that because it shows it in the in layer 1 right here. We can see it. And I'm just going to show you how the eraser and knife tools work before I take it to my word. Okay, so let's just drag out a shape. We have this rectangle. Let's change the color. So now we have this orange rectangle. What if I want to make it 2 rectangles? So I can use the eraser tool and kind of just cut them in half. Now you can see over here in the layers where I had 1 rectangle, I have 2. And if I click away, I can move one away from the other. And they're 2 different shapes. Now the problem here is that I've gotten rid of this space in the center, which depending on what you're doing might not be a big deal, but sometimes you don't want that. So there's another way that you can cut a shape apart. I'm just hitting Command Z to get back to our original rectangle. So something else we can do is use the scissor tool. The scissor tool will cut the shape open. Now the problem with, and now we have, again, 2 shapes. The problem with this, and you can see it here, is that this is an open shape, which is not necessarily always a problem, but usually you want things closed because when shapes are open, they can do weird things. Okay, so I'm gonna hit undo again. Now I think a really good cutting tool is the knife tool. Now, just so you know, the knife tool is not by default, and I just reset my tool so that way you can see what it would be like if you just started from scratch, which most of you probably are. So if you're just starting from scratch, you'll see here that this knife tool isn't on the tool panel. Something else I want to point out is you can tell if there's some stuff buried underneath your tool. If there's an arrow, that just means that there are some more options. This is the regular selection tool, and selecting things is all it does. But let's say the eraser tool also has the scissor underneath. There's this great tool called the knife tool, and I really like it. The way that you find it is by going to Edit Toolbar. It's these 3 dots here. And then you can just find it by scrolling down. It's pretty close to the bottom. And here's the knife tool right here. And to have access to it, I'm just going to drag it under my eraser. So now it's buried under there, and I can click away. There we go. I just double clicked and now we're done. Now I'm going to use my knife tool, and I'm going to use the knife. What I like about it is I just made this swoop, and instead of having 2 open shapes, I now have 2 closed shapes. They fit well together. I can change the color of one. Great. Okay, how does this apply to our text? I just deleted that. Okay, so I'm going to create outlines again. So I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. Okay, so now we have this as a shape, and it's grouped together. If I don't want to ungroup it, because often you do want to move text together, you can keep it grouped, and instead when you want to edit one of them, you can use the direct selection tool to move one of them. Now, some stuff that I didn't talk about before, you have so many options when it comes to using, once it's a shape. You can, let's say, get rid of the apertures in the center, and I'm just deleting those points. And now back to the knife tool. Oh, and you can also, of course, you can move the points around. I don't know why you would want to do that necessarily. That totally depends on what you're trying to do. But you can, let's talk about cutting them apart. So I have my knife tool, and now I'm going to cut this apart. This is so cool. Now we can change, we can also double click in, and now we've gone into the group. Now I can change this. And we can just keep, and now, this is also its own thing. And now I'm going to change this one. And see, they don't need to be changed to the same colors, so I've kind of made a gray swoop thing that looks pretty cool. So those are some cool things that you could do. And let's say you wanted, now I am going to ungroup this, so I'm going to hit Shift Command G, that ungroups it. And now I can also, let's say, select all my bottom pieces. You can also move them around. So let's say we can change things like that. There's some just really cool things that you can do to mess around with your type, and that will make it look so much cooler, and it can also make it more reflective of the themes of your book.